Ladies and gentlemen, beautiful people, welcome to the 97 Republic YouTube channel. I react to news and live events of different sports. So I kindly ask that you hit the like button and the subscribe button, as that will really help this channel grow. And to ensure you don't skip a beat, click the notification bell as well. That way you can guarantee that you don't miss any of the action. Alright? So let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you Conor versus Khabib. If you had it ordered from Wish, Ilia Conor has recently mentioned in an interview that he would like to move up in weight and fight Islam Makhachev for the undisputed lightweight championship of the UFC. And in that interview, gave a lot of praise to Islam, said Islam was a good fighter, but honestly thought that he would be able to beat Islam Makhachev if they had to fight at 155, and also said that he represents the next generation of fighters. Now, could not begin to understand what that means, but you can bet your uncle that I completely believe everything Ilia Conor is saying, and the fact that he is so confident in his ability, and the fact that he is so confident that he could beat Islam Makhachev at 155. I think it's troublesome for Khabib and his Dagestani camp. But when I thought about it, I think it could be better than Conor versus Khabib. Now, I'm not saying it would be bigger, it would be better. The reason why Conor and Khabib was so big, just to remind ourselves, it wasn't the best taking on the best. It was the best taking on the star, where Conor basically just came off of his fight against Floyd Mayweather, had all of the money in the world, and you could have argued that somewhat lost his aspirations and his hunger for what he wants to achieve in the UFC, and basically already established his legacy and cemented his place in the UFC's history forever. And you can basically argue that Khabib fought the worst version of Conor, and McGregor fought the best version of Khabib. So not like both in their prime, the best taking on the best to see who is actually the best. Where with Ilia Conor taking on Islam Makhachev, we have the best lightweight on the planet, arguably the best lightweight of all time, against a guy who beat the best featherweight of all time, and arguably the second best featherweight of all time. So it is literally the best taking on the best. So what I ended up doing, and my thought process, let me take you through this thing that I have here, is I ended up comparing Islam to Khabib, ended up comparing Ilia to Conor, and then eventually ended up comparing Islam to Ilia. And when I compared Islam to Khabib, now if we take resume out of it, because resume I'd say is even. Sure, one guy was undefeated, the other guy did it for way longer, has had the most title defenses inside of the lightweight division's history, and has been undefeated for nearly a decade. So I'd say resume even. If we look at their skill set, I'm probably going to piss off a lot of people, but I have no bias towards either Khabib or Islam. Completely unbiased opinion. Islam Makhachev is much more of a complete fighter than Khabib Nurmagomedov. And when looking at the art of mixed martial arts, Islam is better than Khabib Nurmagomedov, because Khabib was so dominant in wrestling. He didn't need anything else. When you're that dominant at a craft, you don't need anything else. Khabib, as I previously mentioned in the video, Khabib could have ended up not training any sort of striking for the entirety of his life, and he would still be undefeated inside of the UFC. That is how dominant Khabib's wrestling was. Nobody had an answer for it. Nobody could have avoided it. And it was inevitable that when you fight Khabib, He is going to smash you and you will end up losing. But if you could nullify Khabib's wrestling, you would stand a big chance of beating the Khabib Nurmagomedov. And you know how I know that is a fact? Go rewatch the fight. Gleison Tibau versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Gleison Tibau has been the only person in the history of the UFC who has been able to nullify Khabib's wrestling. And to this day, people make an argument to say that Khabib actually lost that fight. And even Joe Rogan, who was commentating on the fight, who was at the fight. Now it's different when you see it on TV and when you're actually at the fight. Joe Rogan said without a shadow of a doubt that Khabib lost that fight. Now you can make an argument to say, well, Gleison Tibau had more sauce in his body than Dustin Poirier has been able to sell in Louisiana. Fair argument. But that doesn't take away the fact that if you could stop Khabib's wrestling, he was quite beatable. Wait, that does not apply to Islam Makhachev. Because we've seen the only person that has been somewhat able to nullify Islam's wrestling was Volkanovski. And we saw in the second fight that there might be something else heading your way if you think that the wrestling is the only problem, because Islam ended up knocking Volk out. Islam's striking it's in another galaxy compared to Khabib's striking. You could not make an argument for Khabib and Islam striking to be the same and to be equal and still claim that you are a sane person. You could not make that argument. Your dog would laugh at you if you said that aloud. Now, with regards to Ilia and Conor, doesn't take a rocket scientist to say that this version of Ilia Topuria is much better than that version of Conor McGregor. That specific version, the post-Floyd, pre-Khabib version of Conor McGregor. Anyone, any sane person would make that argument, and any sane person would accept the fact that this version of Ilia is better than that version of Conor. Now, if you want to make an argument for Prime Conor versus Prime Ilia, who would win, who would edge the other one out, end up victorious, you could probably make that argument. However, still think Ilia would be Prime Conor. Now, you might think I'm insane, you might speak about Aldo, I'll speak about Volk, I'll speak about Holloway, I'll speak about Undefeated, I'll speak about the fact that Ilia Topuria probably has the best boxing I have seen in my life inside of the UFC, and it is not even close. The only person that would probably be able to compete, and I'm just talking about pure boxing inside of the UFC, is either Dustin Poirier or Max Holloway. And Ilia knocked one of them out. Ilia Topuria is probably as complete of a fighter as we have right now inside of the UFC, where his boxing, I could not begin to describe how big of a fan I am of Ilia's boxing. If my girlfriend ever told me that I could tie her up and do whatever I want, I would tie her up and go watch Ilia Topuria box. Honestly, beautiful, a piece of art. It looks like Van Gogh is busy with a painting Topuria box. Art, cinema, Scorsese like, whatever you want to call it. That is the level of Ilia's boxing. And the scariest part of it is Ilia's foundation. His mixed martial arts foundation is wrestling. He started off his mixed martial arts journey as a wrestler. So he has incredible wrestling. Imagine you fused Dustin Poirier with Merab Dvalishvili. You took those two and you made a concoction. That would probably be Ilia Topuria. because he used this boxing earlier in his UFC career, dominated, and then became this mythical thing that he is today. Now, people might say glazing, do not care. Yeah, I say appreciation. Because Ilya basically decided that he was not going to use wrestling as much as he did previously because he fell in love with his boxing. And to be honest, so did I. Yeah, thank Ilya, round of applause. Yeah, the Georgian slash Spanish Batman, it saves the day. So we have Ilya, who is better than that version of Conor. We have Islam, who is better than Khabib. Yeah, I said it. And we have them facing off and taking on one another at lightweight. So better equals better fight. Now, obviously not bigger. We'll probably never see something bigger than Khabib versus Conor. Right? It had massive implications. You had the whole of Russia, the whole of Ireland. One of the craziest and most iconic press conferences ever seen and ever to be seen inside of the UFC. So would not be bigger. But with regards to skill set and mixed martial arts, 100% would be better. 100% would be better. Now, for the people who thinks that Islam Makhachev would dog walk Ilia Conor at 155, you are the reason why they had lobotomies in the 1960s. Now, there is no sane way that you can say that Islam dominates Ilia Conor at 155. There is no way that you can convince yourself that you don't need help if you make that argument. Now, you might put the light bulb down, right? Instead of smoking it, try and replace it. There's no way. We're talking about an Ilia Conor, first of all, who's undefeated. Now, okay, we have some undefeated fighters. What's the big deal? There's an undefeated champion. Not a lot of them. In fact, John Jones. That's it. Second of all, might be one of the best boxers ever seen inside of the UFC. One of the best boxers ever seen inside of the UFC. Third of all, as I mentioned, foundation wrestling. So if he needs it, we'll use it. If he needs to defend himself, we'll use it. He talks about submitting Islam Makhachev. The audacity to even mention something like this, it is absurd. And then, lastly, and most important, Ilya managed to knock out Alexander Volkanovski. Now you can say, well, Islam did the same. Yeah, the difference is Ilya did it at the king's weight and the king's division. A division where Volk has been king and sacrificing peasants. Ilya knocked him out at that weight. Where Islam knocked him out at 155, where obviously Volk isn't as comfortable as he is at 145. So that is the first point. The second point, we saw Ilya knock someone out who came off of one of his best performances in his life, beating Justin Gaethje for the BMF belt, dominating Justin Gaethje for the BMF belt, pointing to the ground in the last few seconds and sending Justin Gaethje into orbit. We saw Ilya knock out that guy who also, by the way, has never been knocked out in his life. If you are at home and you are one of those people that think Islam Makhachev is dog walking the Spanish slash Georgian Bruce Wayne, go find help, brother.